Welcome to a new horror story. Here we begin. Let's go.
The bothered soulless short story written by me enjoy an enclosure of putrefaction, a miasma of the foulest kind. This was the very essence that encompassed all that surrounded me as the hour approached when I must needs venture forth into the thoroughfares. It would have been a wonderment to find oneself surprised by such a commonplace inhabitant, a denizen, moreover, of that Great Britain of the time, and of London in particular, a city that then did reek with a most unwholesome stench, on every hand, and the very Thames herself did exhale no less a pestilential breath. For it was the year of our Lord, 1856, and there was naught to banish such maladies, nor the concentrated murk, nor that lurid gloom, that did cast its pall upon all that one could behold. All was vastly altered in certain thoroughfares, where not a single inch of those wretched tenements might be discerned, which were wont to be found on the very outskirts of this city. Yet still, it was impossible to elude the darkness, which did descend from above, as if possessed by a haughty sentience. Perhaps, there was some meaning within that gloom, which was not difficult to apprehend, and yet, there was something more besides, an emotion, at once, both melancholy and cruelly sinister. Those throngs who did then crowd one street after another, could not leave their homes without the aid of handkerchiefs, which they did press to their noses, for so powerful was that miasma that, upon occasion, it would instantly deprive those who ventured into its embrace of their very senses, the ladies, in particular, who were, as they say, most impressionable, for it was a rare thing indeed to find one of their number who was truly both stalwart and courageous. I dare affirm, with most grievous certainty, that there was, at that time, a presence that did serve as a most dreadful portent. My own trifling difficulty, with a mere handkerchief, did pale in the face of such a horror, and I, with a sickening disgust, did grasp it tightly to my mouth, with my left hand, whilst with my right, I kept hold of the reins, so that I might restrain my steed, for I must needs travel to the manor of the Earl of Memsbury, the emphasis upon the final syllable, to attend to a matter of some importance, and for his well-being. I was greatly perturbed, for within that wretched atmosphere that did then pervade all of England, he had fallen gravely ill, and did now cough forth blood, and it was not only cholera that had erupted, with a most fearsome velocity, but also the dreaded consumption that did, all too often, make its ghastly presence felt. And it was this latter that had already claimed him, some time since, I can assure you. Memsbury was always a soul that was physically frail, yet was he possessed of a great and noble spirit, for though that vile sickness did turn all of his intentions to dust, and did confine him to the very confines of his manor, still, his spirit did never fall, for as yet he was not chained fast to his bed, but this, I fear, will not long remain. His very visage had suffered under the torment of that disease, for of his hale complexion, nothing now remained, and upon his brow, as pallid as that of a corpse, there did now course veins of blue, visible to all. I can declare that he did bear the appearance of one already passed from this world, when set against the other gentleman, for his eyes, which did shine with a ghastly greyness, like the very clouds of a storm that does portend some tempest to come, and those dark locks, the colour of coal itself, these did combine most dreadfully with the dark hollows that had formed beneath his eyes, and that ghastly cast that did so disfigure him. He did grow so thin, that he had become naught but a skeleton, clothed in but flesh and skin. I ask now, might one so ravaged by that fell consumption, and at such a stage of that vile sickness, possess the very means to care for himself? I doubt it most gravely, for such a malady will, without fail, chain him to his bed, as if bound by the very hand of death. He lingers, I am told, growing weaker by the hour, perishing at once with both agonizing slowness and dreadful torment. Well, such is his nature, strong, I mused, a slight smile playing upon my lips, though beneath it lay a deep sorrow, and not a true joy in the thought of seeing him again after so long an absence. But will he live to see the coming of, at last, that universal peace? Yes, I uttered abruptly, after a prolonged silence, which startled my steed, Angus. He shuddered in alarm, and I was obliged to soothe him, assuring him that I was not yet fallen victim to this plague and that all was well, yet I hissed the words, as if I were indeed afflicted. I fell silent then, looking about me. I could behold ladies upon the embankment of the Thames, their faces shrouded in scarves and their long trains, like monstrous tentacles, dragging upon the cobblestones, and they swept the dust, a dust which barely brushed the hooves of Angus, shod with iron. What must it be like to follow behind these creatures? Best they should leap aside. Feeling an emptiness within my soul, and a sadness that seemed to consume my very being, I seized the reins and spurred Angus forward, so that we did thunder past the carriages at a most unholy speed. I would not have my own gown brush that foul dust, and yet its hem did barely clear the side of Angus. And through all of this, I could not shake the thought, that I must reach the manor of the Earl of Memsbury as soon as humanly possible, for I feared that he might utter his last and then die, without ever seeing me, and by God I shall not permit such a thing. I pondered these thoughts, and listened to the voice within me, silently, yet with a disquiet that was fast becoming a terror. For a time, I had quite forgotten the foul stench that did cling to me on every hand, but, as I shook myself from those lugubrious musings, that most terrible odor of rot and burning did assail my senses, and it was, without a doubt, suspicious. It was then that Angus did prance and snort, turning in the direction of a street whence that vile stench did seem to emanate, or was it a combination of foul odors? Angus did shy, refusing to advance, when there did come the sound of laughter and curses, which, as I soon discovered, was none other than those debased wretches who gathered in a nearby public house, who had, in their drunken folly, decided to play with both fire and spirits. "I fear not to play with the flames," one shrieked, in a voice that was both garbled and hoarse. Then, he grew silent and groaned, as the others began to beat him, until he was unrecognizable, his face a mass of bruises, some large and some small. And he sought to defend himself against these assailants, whilst the mistress of the establishment did try in vain to separate them, and the air did resound with noise and shouting and dreadful oaths that one might only hear from the lips of those poor souls, who have been consumed by bitterness. They were most nauseating to behold. The air was heavy and stifling, and I longed to cough, but I did not remove the scarf from my mouth, nor did I seek to incite some ghastly consequence. I nodded, and watched all that did unfold, and at that moment the hostess did turn, and it did seem to me, that she was of a most unkempt manner, for her hair did bristle in every direction, and it was tied in a thin tail, and her face was marked with wrinkles, so that she did bear the aspect of a woman of 70 and 10, or perhaps older. And I pondered on her fate, and that she was, surely, one of those old maids, who could not abide the company of men, and that she was, most likely, unmarried, because she had not found a partner of suitable rank. She did beckon to me, in a manner most crude and abrupt, to dismount and come to her, and with this, I did grow uneasy, and Angus, having recovered his breath, did snort and eyed the scene in all its dreadfulness. "Is it you, miss, who are rushing to see his grace?" she inquired, with a voice that was both shrill and raspy, addressing me. "I saw you gallop across the embankment, towards that manor." "Pardon, madam," I replied, my voice catching in my throat, as I held the rag to my face. "Indeed, I am traveling to see his grace. But how did you know?" "'Tis so, those vile drunkards did let loose their wretched tales within the throes of a stupor asleep, and thereafter, all grew silent, for the Earl has been gripped by that fell consumption these many years. It is most unnatural that he should summon any to his side, after such a long solitude. He hath become oversaturated with the tedium of his days." "Oversaturated with what?" "Oh, that is it," replied that ancient crone, then did grow silent, as if some invisible horror had taken hold of her, causing her to shrink within herself. "Answer me this, as it is in truth," I exclaimed, my very soul aflame with a growing anxiety, for I knew all this pertained to the Earl, and with my words the very wind did howl like a ravening wolf, wild with hunger. "For God's sake." Then the hostess did separate the drunkards, whom the foul liquor had brought to the very brink of unconsciousness, and approached me with a gait that was broken and uneven, as if she did lean upon her right leg as if it were a staff. She did seize me by the ribbon upon the neckline of my gown, and pulling at that, she forced my ear close to her lips. "They do say that the Earl," she whispered, her gaze failing to meet my own, yet her body a picture of fearful agitation, "hath turned his mind to the dark arts. He hath called forth some spectral entity, which has shown itself to be a very devilish creature, and it hath begun, quietly, and yet with unwavering purpose, to corrupt his very life force. Once he was frail,